Sounds like football, baby.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Smackdown. I am your host, Jake Rip. You can find me on Twitter at JakeTakesFF. And joining me, as always, folks, you know him, you love him, and if you're looking for a cool cat to follow on Twitter, you can do so. Follow him at KyleMonth8. Oh, man, see, I messed up my intro now. He is on Twitter at KyleMonth8, but however, he's on this show all year long, folks. Give it up for Kyle August.
Nailed it.
The wording doesn't work so right. The way I tried to switch it up a little bit and give it a little bit of flair, and I'm like, oh, and then how do I talk about how he's here all year long and not just in month 8? Hitting road bumps early. What's going on, man?
Dude, it's good to be here. We'll cut you a break. I was steering the ship the last couple weeks. You know, we've had some fun talking draft strategies. Had Addison on last week. Had a blast talking about reality sports online. That was a ton of fun. But man, I'm doing good. Fresh off of vacation, few days off, and good weekend, and right back to it here mid-June. Football can't get here soon enough, though, man.
Yeah, you know what? And speaking of that auction, I was thinking about that the other day. And actually, even today, I was like, you know what? I was thinking about some of the specific players I was bidding for. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, I think you were taking it a little easy on me in this draft. I think there was a couple points, like, you know, we were going at it for Chase Claypool there. I think it got to a point where you were like, you know what? This is Jake's first time. I'm going to let him have Chase Claypool. We went back and forth on Tyler Lockett. I think it was the same thing. I think you were like, you know what? I don't need to win Tyler Lockett. Let's let Jake win somebody in his first auction. Is there any truth to that?
Dude, I did not. I would never go easy on anybody, especially in fantasy football. But okay. I will definitely tell. I wish I would have remembered more of the names too. And I'm sure I probably could just look at your team. But and in addition to those two guys, I definitely remember times where you and I felt like we're going head to head on players. And I'm like, and jokingly, like in the chat, I'm like, this is going to be a rough podcast this week because you keep stinking up the show here by making me outbid, that was it. So yeah. It's just funny, man.
You know what? And for Tyler Lockett, I think at some point it got personal. There was no one else bidding. It was just me and you back and forth and back and forth. I was like, you know what? I'm going to win this player. And then all of a sudden, whatever I bid, I saw the time start ticking down. I'm like, oh no, 3, 2, 1. Like, you know what? I instantly regret. I should not have paid whatever I paid for Tyler Lockett.
I did the same thing in another auction this year with Jerry. It was only because I was going head to head against Jerry. I was like, I'm not losing. And then like I paid Michael Gallup an obscene amount of money, and I was just like, oh no, what happened? But for that like 10 seconds, you're like, this, I won. Haha. And now you're like, oh shoot. Now I live with it. But yeah, dude, I'm usually on the wrong side of those, I feel like, than winning. But but when you do pull it off, you're like, I got him. He got stuck with that contract. But unfortunately, I'm on the other side most of the time. You have that like 10 seconds of glory, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, great, I have to live with my decision now.
Yeah. Here I am with Tyler Lockett now, probably on a 3 to 4 year deal for way too much money. I don't even know where he's going to be in 2 years. But yep, that's how it goes in these auction drafts. You live and you learn. And in case you have not heard, folks, I'm going to transition here. The Fantasy Football Smackdown is streaming live to YouTube every single Monday night. So subscribe to the DWZ YouTube channel so that you can catch as many live shows as you possibly can handle. If you're tuning into this one right now, then you see this sweet gear that I'm sporting on the show. I don't even know if I should say what it is. Like, I feel like I'm spoiling it.
Don't give it away. Yeah,
you're right. The people who are here on YouTube, they're seeing that. Hold on,
look at that. Man, you guys are missing out if you're not on YouTube.
Yep, you can hear the excitement in Kyle's voice. You're really, really missing out. So, like I said, subscribe to the DWZ YouTube channel. You'll catch us every Monday night. If you can't hang with us Monday nights, then you're all good. You can catch us Tuesday morning. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Man, you know what? There is something to this hosting thing. I think that you need to build like some momentum or get a little bit of rhythm going, like on a weekly to bi-weekly basis. The 2 weeks off is it's leaving me stuttering. I can't find my words. I can't say subscribe, which is a problem.
Yes, if you can pronounce anything, it should be that. No, the worst is, and especially too, because I'm not I wouldn't say I'm the best host, but I definitely like my everyday English, there's struggles. So the worst is when you're doing a podcast is that once you mess up once, you may be okay. You can rebound from that. Second time, now it starts getting in your head. Yeah, and by like 3 or 4, you're like that second baseman chucking it into the 18th row. It's just how it works. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now that you said that, now I'm totally in my head. But let's keep strolling through this episode.
Absolutely.
2 weeks ago, we had the episode, Kyle, you and I. We started exploring a little bit of the 0 RB strategy and a little bit of the risk reward ratios surrounding that. I know we've kind of touched on it since then, but what are your overall thoughts about the 0 RB strategy? Let's wrap up that whole episode. Is there any chance you might be doing a little 0 RB this summer?
Yeah, and we're going to be diving into like in depth on so many players as we get closer to draft season, and just talking about strategies has been interesting. It's definitely motivated me to do more mock drafts just to try it out. Sleeper especially it's so freaking easy. You can just do one against a computer. I will have some more as we get closer. I'll put together listener ones usually. It's just so people can get a feel against drafting against other people and that might be trying to do the same strategy. But I will tell you, man, it was a great discussion. I'm definitely glad that I dove into it. It was really the first time I would say that I really took a look at it, and as we talked it out and then attempted it there. Like I had tried it before. I kind of knew about it. I kind of looked at things a bit, but I never really dove into it as much as we did, leading up to that show and during that show. I'll tell you, man, I've done some mock drafts for that strategy, and it's just not my thing. Like it's tough, man.
It's tough because you don't know that the 0 RB strategy works until like mid to late season when you see how everything plays out, because a true 0 RB strategy has RBs that, the Michael Carters of this year, the Trey Sermons, the rookies who have that upside, or backup running backs who might come in for injury, but these guys that can pop off, you just don't know it until, November, December, whenever.
Yeah. Dude, it's an uneasy feeling though too, because not that I've ever like draft for safety. I feel like that's a great way to lose, to be honest. Like I just feel like, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know I want to leave my draft knowing like, damn, bro, if I don't get that first waiver running back or something coming right away, I'm be in trouble. That we talked about that anchor strategy. So if you missed it, go back and check out the rest of the show. But definitely a great discussion. I think talking strategy at this point of the year is something that's going to be helpful. We'll keep that in mind as we're moving forward, because now it's going to change how we evaluate these players too. Because not just like, oh, this guy versus this guy. It's the decisions that you're making as those players are on the clock. So that one was a ton of fun. Definitely glad we went through that exercise.
Yeah, and we're going to be moving into the wide receiver position today. But before we get into the bulk of today's show, I want to talk a little bit about some of the more recent NFL storylines that have been going on here, because there's actually a few interesting ones, which is enough to get me excited. As we sit here middle of June, storylines are hard to come by, and there's a couple decent ones here that piqued my interest. So let's start with this one. Kyler Murray wants to run less. He was quoted saying, in quotes, his legs should be a luxury, and the offense can't be so one-dimensional, as evidence of their performance as a whole once Kyler started becoming a little bit more conservative running the ball, like after week 10. Mm-hmm. So what do you take away from that quote? Is it, it's always a bit concerning, or a little more concerning to me when it comes straight from the player, as opposed to the coach saying, oh, we want to run the ball less, or the offensive coordinator saying, oh, it would be good if we started relying more on the passing game. But coming straight from Kyler, what do you think about that?
He said he wants to run less. I'd say wants are nice, bro. Like you make this offense go because you have that aspect of your game. Even, and yes, over time, these players, and we've seen it with Russell Wilson, I think, and he was never to the degree of a Lamar or Kyler, but like over time, he's kind of dialed it back. He's played smarter from that aspect. And you don't need, that rushing production from Murray to still have a solid quarterback, because unlike Lamar, Murray is still throwing the ball a ton. His attempts are, more normalized compared to Lamar, who, if he doesn't have that rushing, you are screwed. Now, we did see last year, you got a glimpse of it when Kyler stopped running. He was not great, but especially in comparison, because he was on freaking fire to start the year. So especially this time of year, and we'll get into more of these, I'm sure, here, it's even, some other examples, but like you definitely kind of tuck this away a little bit. The more and more you keep hearing it, it's kind of that like where there's smoke, there's fire type of things. But for now, it's just kind of like, all right, I'm making a note. I'm not moving. I'm not overreacting to it. I might take a look at, hey, what were those stats really like when he wasn't running as much, right? Like, what is my floor here maybe compared to what I thought? So it's definitely, yeah, if you're drafting Murray at 102 among quarterbacks, then yeah, maybe you're freaking out. But I think the smart move is to kind of just stow this away, maybe look at him from a different perspective, and then just keep your ear to the ground a little bit.
Yeah, you talked for a second about how the stats were declining after he began to run less. That was because of a shoulder injury?
It was an injury. Yeah, I can't remember. I'm horrible with remembering what the injury was, but I had him on my team, and I remember he got a little banged up, and he just stopped running. He just freaking stopped, and I'm just like, dude, I need this. Come on, bro, you got me all the way here.
Yeah. And just to put that into perspective and refresh people's memory, from weeks 1 through 10, Kyler Murray, he was literally on pace for 1,070 rushing yards and 18 rushing touchdowns. So he was QB1, 30 fantasy points per game over that period of time. He was averaging 10 rushing attempts per game. I mean, it was just absolutely absurd. But rest of season, so that would be weeks 11 through 17. He was QB 14, averaging 17 fantasy points per game. And that 10 rushing attempts per game dropped down to 6.6 rushing attempts per game, which when you zoom out, doesn't seem like a huge drop in rushing production, but I guess, that
I'm assuming those touchdowns evaporated.
Oh yeah, the touchdown super evaporated. He might have had one more rushing touchdown the rest of the season. I didn't even write it down. I guess it was that minuscule, but just like I said, less than 4 rushing attempts per game doesn't seem like it would have that huge of an impact. But that apparently that's the difference between 30 fantasy points per game and 17 fantasy points per game. Like you said, obviously ending up in the end zone too is huge. It's just weird to me that it seemed like the reason he stopped running last season, it was because maybe he was favoring that shoulder. He didn't want to take any more hits. And now it seems more of like a philosophical thing, like the offense needs to be better at forcing the ball through the air. And actually, it seems like the whole coaching staff and organization's on board with that, because look what they've done this offseason. They go out and get A.J. Green. They add Rondale Moore in the draft. They've already got DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, this offense is ready to go. So, like you said, Kyler's still going to score points from slinging it through the air. But, man, the ceiling that's to be had if he ends up running anything like he was, anything close to like he was in weeks 1 through 10, I mean, it's hard. How is he not QB1 overall?
Yeah, it's definitely would be a negative for fantasy from a fantasy perspective. And that's the tough part too, because sometimes, man, that the smarter NFL decision doesn't help us for what we're trying to do, So you need to find that sweet spot where they're still letting let the reins go a little bit, let him do his thing. And he's just a natural rusher, man. He's extremely elusive, and they're going to continue to leverage that. When it gets down to it, they haven't done enough. I think in free agency on the offensive line, to address those concerns. He's going to continue to be under pressure, running a bit, running for his life at times, and instinct's going to take over, and he's going to get it done on the ground.
How about this little news blurb here? Deshaun Watson allegedly wants to go to Denver. You know a little bit about Denver, Kyle, coming fresh back from a little Denver vacation.
Yeah.
But apparently Kareem Jackson of the Broncos went on Aqib Talib's podcast. Did not know Aqib Talib had a podcast, but I'll plug that. I would plug that if I knew what it was called, but we'll just call it Aqib Talib's podcast. But he went on there and he talked all about how Deshaun has been telling him that he wants to be in Denver. I think I pretty much wrote that down word for word, how I read it, telling Deshaun telling him that he wants to be in Denver. And to me, that sounds kind of like Kyle, if you were on a football team and you were like, Jake, you should come play on this football team. And I was like, oh yeah, bro, I want to play on that football team. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't read too much into this kind of thing until I see like a tweet from Adam Schefter, like something from Ian Rappaport. Otherwise, it just sounds like maybe just two buddies kind of bullshitting via text message. But do you think there's any truth to this? Like there might actually be something going on between the Denver front office and Deshaun Watson. I mean, they already went out and got Teddy Bridgewater. It's clear that I think it's clear that they don't think that Drew Lock's the man. I know Drew Lock isn't the man, but what do you make of the newest Deshaun Watson news? And I'll make that a 2-part question. If he goes to Denver, where does he rank for you among quarterbacks?
So on the front end, that in addition to bringing Bridgewater, like we also saw that apparently Fields was not somebody that Denver trusted either, because they were staring him down on the clock. Yeah. And whether, they have something, where they feel maybe they can acquire Watson in some way, or because even with Bridgewater, yes, he might be better and get it done over what Drew Lock could provide. And they're a team that wants to leverage their defense and play that kind of ball. But yeah, for me, it's just a reminder that any time, it just takes one alert, and if Denver addresses that quarterback situation, whether it's with Watson this year or going up to get their guy next season, I still like Jerry freaking Judy, man. Like, if you're going to wait for that news to drop to get him, then you're overpaying, So from a dynasty perspective, like, man, those Denver guys, all those pass catchers are still players that I want to try to acquire at their current price. We kind of, you had an opportunity pre-draft. It didn't hit right away, but I still think there's going to be times we're sitting here a year from now, they're going to be in a much better quarterback situation. I feel like if Deshaun ends up in Denver, man, again, he's a guy who runs the ball a decent, a good amount. He was, for me, I'm trying to think back now, because I had to bury him after all this recent news and stuff. Like, for redraft this year, man, he's still out. He's going to be outside the top 12, because I also think that if he plays somewhere.
If he goes to Denver, or is that assuming he's in Houston?
Either. Ooh. Because the problem is, I don't think he's going to, I think he might play half the year. Like, at this point, we've seen the NFL suspend players for far less. And if he pretty much settles anything, he is going to get a suspension. So on a per game basis, I still think he can be top 10, because he's that elite. His weapons would be off the charts, even better than what he had in Houston last season. But I really think that he's going to carry a suspension with him this year. So take that for what it's worth. You're going to get him at a discount in redraft leagues. If he misses time, you can still, right now still get him at a discount, because people in dynasty, because if he misses time, it's just, you got to decide which fence you want to be on and take that risk.
At what point in redraft leagues, I'm trying to think how I want to word this question. Like, if you're drafting in, let's say early August, and Deshaun Watson still there, we haven't heard anything. He hasn't said he's coming back to Houston. He hasn't said he's going to Denver. Where are you comfortable drafting Deshaun Watson, if at all? I mean, I guess you really, comfortable isn't the right word, because you can't really be comfortable with that kind of situation. It reeks of Le'Veon Bell type of scenarios. But what do you think's going on? What would you do there?
He won't be the only player like this, because you'll have injuries, you'll have news, suspensions, all sorts of things that are going to push people down. Like in a 1 QB league, for me, as right now, like in this scenario, like he's one of those players that the only time I'm really going to have him on my board is like in those leagues that have like keeper potential, or like penalties where you can keep guys where you drafted them or something along those lines. Like, I'm not even going to rank him in that. If like it's this cloudy, I'm just going to literally write his name at the bottom of my draft sheet, knowing that in rounds 13 or 14 or whatever, like I'm going to try to sneak one through here before anybody thinks about him. And again, there's gonna be more players like that. I pretty much it should just be dubbed the Josh Gordon strategy, because I'm pretty sure I've done that every year of my life with him. But that's pretty much it. In Superflex, you're going to go earlier, because if it's worth a ton more if he hits. Even if you only get him for half the season. In 1 QB, it's like, man, you're gonna have to roster him for so long, and that payoff, at that point, I think I think you might be missing opportunity to try to just find somebody else that can put up comparable stats.
So tell me this: it's early August, you're drafting, you're late in the draft, you need a quarterback, and you've got Deshaun Watson's there, and the other quarterbacks available are Baker Mayfield, Carson Wentz, Derek Carr, Cam Newton, Jared Goff. You pulling the trigger on Watson?
Probably not, or probably over Cam if it's like in the same scenario we know now, just because Baker, but I would take those guys. Like I don't want to be dealing with this all year. In 1 QB leagues, I'll figure it out. In Superflex, again, the risk reward is way, way greater, but I think by August we'll have an idea either way. So hopefully we won't have to be staring that down a decision with like nothing to work from. But I'm anticipating, if you're looking at now, whether it's to position yourself in dynasty or for keeper purposes in redraft leagues, or whether you're just doing rankings, is that I think I have him I will be ranking him from the position of he's going to miss time.
Yeah.
So
Okay, well, I got one more bit of news I want to talk
Sure.
about. It should be a smooth transition into the wide receiver portion of this show. But the Athletics' Connor Hughes noted that Jets rookie wide receiver Elijah Moore has been the most impressive player at OTAs, and it's not even close. He went on to say that Moore has been, quote, uncoverable near the goal line. Oh, hold on. I'm not done. A couple more recent quotes from it's Robert Saleh, right?
Salah, yeah.
I thought so. I should know that by now. He says in quotes, his work ethic is off the charts. He also says his mindset is off the charts. He went on to praise Moore's versatility, talked about how you can line him up anywhere on the field. I don't know, man. I feel like at this rate, like Moore's ADP might get a little stupid for my taste in the coming months. Just today, the Jets signed Jamison Crowder, which a couple weeks ago I joked about with you on this podcast. Like I was sure Jamison Crowder was out the door.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Corey Davis, they've got Denzel Mims. There's Chris Herndon, who no one's talking about, but makes for kind of a nice sleeper tight end, in my opinion. I saw something today about Keelan Cole.
Yes.
He's gonna have a spot in 3 receiver sets.
Yeah.
I don't know how they figure. I mean, I don't know what math I'm missing out here, or if there's somehow Denzel Mims is getting the short end of the stick here. But all right, I'm getting off the track here. Anyways, back to Elijah Moore. I feel like he's being treated like there's going to be this guaranteed workload first thing when he walks in. It's almost like an Amon-Ra, you know how I love my Amon-Ra St. Brown for Detroit. It's almost like that kind of situation where you're walking in and there's no one else you're competing with, and there's going to be all these targets, but that's just not the case. You're kind of an Elijah Moore guy, right?
I really I own more Elijah Moore shares in Dynasty than I probably care to share on this show. Like it's just any draft I could get. Like I had a draft last week. I moved up to go get him. He was sitting there at the 204 in a 1 QB league. I was like, I'm going to get him. Like, why is this guy still here? I gave up 2 seconds to go to, I moved up like 3 or 4 spots, gave up a second next year. Don't care. I want my guy. I thought that guy would be Terrence Marshall, to be honest, but as like dynasty rookie drafts have worked out, Moore just is kind of like, you know, he keeps falling and he's going behind Bateman for me. Like I love where Moore's at. If he was picked 2 picks earlier and he carried that first round, you know, aura, he would be drafted much higher in dynasty leagues. We drafted much earlier in redraft leagues. For me, Moore. Well, we talked about it when we did our wide receiver re-rankings after the NFL draft. Like it goes Jamar Chase, and then for me, Elijah Moore was right there as the number 2 wide receiver to own for this year of the rookie class. Yeah. You know, there's a gap for sure, but I just think that but that was also assuming Crowder was going to get cut. I still think it's tough.
That's the thing. I feel like at this point, I mean, should Elijah Moore even be drafted in redraft? Like the crowded receiver room, the uncertainty at quarterback, the new coaching staff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, again, I've so far been kind of comparing him to the rest of this rookie class. You know, I think Waddle walks into an interesting scenario. Haha. Hey. But they probably have, I mean, and whatever you think about Parker, but they added Will Fuller's only in this 1 game. So it's a little bit crowded there as well. Devonta Smith is paired with a quarterback that I do not trust from a passing game perspective. And so like, it's just kind of like I said, it's Chase and then at the field. So like, I'll take some shots on some of these guys on the unknown. Do I wish Crowder wasn't there? Yeah, man. I think that would be killer for Moore. I mean, he carries that slot, mentality from college. He saw an ungodly amount of receptions, during his time last year. But I think, yeah, if this hype is fun, you know, because he's a player that I was excited about. And I think he's somebody that you got at a very reasonable price in rookie drafts. Come redraft season, you know, he's going to be a guy I'm targeting, but I'm not, if this hype train keeps going, eventually he'll just outprice himself and you're not going to get a return on round 7 Elijah Moore. Like that's just not in the cards for me. So if he sticks in the double-digit rounds, maybe even round 9, like I'll take a shot on him. But if he starts creeping around 6, round 7, like no. Like there's too many mouths to feed there. And part of that too, I think you kind of mentioned it, like there actually was, and this is all a lot of this stuff, keep an eye on where it's coming from. The coaches, you know, even though it's coach speak, I'll put some weight in that when it's these guys that are speculating, like these beat reporters. Like I think one of the beat reporters said that he thinks that Javonte Williams is going to be the starter, right? I don't really care what you think.
Yeah.
You know, it's June. You know, I'll talk to you later. You know,
dude, that's actually a fantastic point because, and this is the season for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All these reporters end up getting into training camp, and then you can get clicks on stuff like that. Javonte Williams is going to be number one. That got me. I read the same thing. I got a little excited. I checked it out.
Yeah.
But I totally see what you mean. That could be the same thing here. Like, not to discredit the Athletics' Connor Hughes, but I don't know who you are. I don't know if, you know, I don't know Connor Hughes' resume or his relationship with the Jets or what was going on at practice that day. It might have been Elijah Moore day. They might have said, let's try to see how much we can get Elijah Moore the ball near the goal line. That could have been the objective of that practice. I mean, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but I totally get what you mean as far as like, it definitely means a lot more if it's coming from someone in the organization or that player.
And and the coaches, you know, like I said, hearing that stuff from them is good. Obviously, they made the pick, so they feel strongly about this kid's talent. So again, at this time of year, you kind of take it for what it's worth, but I don't think you ignore all this stuff. Like even the negative report on Denzel Mims, where like it looked like maybe he wasn't really being featured much. Like Keelan Cole's out there in 3 wide receiver sets, tuck that away. You know, like, you know, just kind of keep an eye out because the more and more you hear, then you start making adjustments. But yeah, I mean, Elijah Moore is somebody that I'm really pumped for from a dynasty perspective. In redraft leagues, I'm kind of waiting, seeing still who's that number 2 rookie receiver, and you know, a lot of that will come down to just draft day values.
I think that covers the bulk of anything remotely interesting going on in the NFL right now. But again, not bad for the month of June. I'll take what we can get. But let's talk a little bit more about the I'm all about more now, Moore, a little bit more about the wide receiver position, a little bit more of draft strategy as it pertains to the wide receiver position. Kyle, you know, I mean, from the drafts that we've been in together, I love racking up those PPR monsters. I want those guys that when going into Sunday, I have no worries because I know that no matter what the matchup is, my guys are going to get volume. They're going to get double-digit targets. You know, if I can make that happen without compromising too much skill level to any other positions, I'm all about it. You know, that's kind of what makes the zero RB strategy like almost worth trying. You know, the reward, assuming that you're able to muster up something in your RB slots. If you're able to make something happen there, then your reward is that you get a pair of wide receivers that are each going to catch 100 passes with your first couple picks. You know, you could take it a step further and do what we did in that mock draft and take a couple more wide receivers. Now in a PPR league, you're just automatically wrapping up points per reception. But do you have any specific strategy when it comes to drafting wide receivers, you know, in any specific format? And I'll make that one a 2-part question too. How much of a difference does it make to you if you're playing in PPR formats as opposed to half PPR? Does that kind of change where you're maybe willing to pull the trigger on your first wide receiver, stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll go with the format specific first. Like for me, if I'm in a full PPR, you know, whether you have 3 wide receivers or in a flex, or even if it's 2 wide receivers, 2 flex spots, like if I in PPR, I'm treating those flex spots as pretty much as wide receiver slots, trying to fill that as much as possible. Yeah. And then I'm really treating my RB2 slot more like a flex spot. Like I'm going to create a little rotation for that, you know, maybe hopefully get, you know, 3 lottery tickets for that one slot, get myself 1 good running back, you know, that I can really count on. And I just treat that running back 2 slot as a flex a little bit more in half PPR, or God scoring, standard scoring, RIP. I am looking, I will treat my wide receiver 2 slot or my wide receiver 3, whatever the last one is. I more treat that one as a flex. I'm trying to get some running backs into those flex positions more often than not. You know, they're trying to stack those high-end running backs in those types of formats, and just knowing that, like, all right, that wide receiver 2 or that wide receiver 3, whatever the last one is, right? Depending on what you have to start. Those guys are everywhere. I can find them in the mid rounds, and I'm going to just find a ton of these players. So that does make a difference for me. I definitely do make more of a, you know, aim for the wide receiver position, because I feel like you should always be playing with wide receivers in your flex spots. You know, obviously bye weeks will make you have to adjust that a bit. But that's my target. I want to have wide receivers for that flex spot. I don't want to have to sit there and roll out, you know, God, why am I blank? I should know him. Harris from the Patriots. Sorry, I own him on every league. Damian Harris. And unfortunately,
I love how you defaulted to Damian Harris so hard that even when you forgot his name, you're like, no, it's Damian Harris. Can't get another running back. Damian Harris.
That dude is like somebody that I own him in leagues that are PPR, and I hate my life. I'm just like, I don't care. This guy could get when he gets 15 touches, those are 15 attempts. There's no catches here, right?
It's
You
hilarious.
don't want those players.
You get no catches as some sort of bonus. You don't even know. I mean, I guess he went on a little bit of a run last year, but you didn't even know if he was getting the entire workload. Yeah. So I mean, I guess Damian Harris is kind of the perfect example.
Yeah, like I don't want those guys. Like I want there's plenty of wide receivers out there. It can be, the position is insanely deep. So it does differ between those two formats for sure. My strategy, though, generally across the board too, is pretty much the opposite of that zero RB strategy we talked about before. Yeah. I want to load up on those big name running backs just because it's the scarcity, and especially in redraft leagues, because we're all going for the same thing, right? We're all going to win this year. You got to hit on those big running backs. It's going to be really, really difficult. And as we've talked about, past strategy today, future shows this month, is that there's not a guaranteed way to win. There's not a guaranteed way to lose. You can win, going in different directions. It's just what do you feel comfortable with? What do you feel your strong suits are? If you feel like, man, I'm really good at finding those waiver wire ads and at running back, then yeah, maybe you lean a little bit the other way. For me, I found that I feel pretty comfortable in my ability to identify mid-round wide receivers that can turn into starters. So knowing that, I don't want to be sitting there like, oh man, I really like these guys around 7 or 8. I already have 5 wide receivers, so I guess I'm just adding to my bench, and then the running backs are continuously getting worse and worse and worse. So that's generally how I'm leaning towards this position, and it's one that is just extremely deep, and I feel it's the same way. And like that kind of gets tossed around, and I have some numbers for it we can get into here, but the wide receiver position is just so freaking deep that it just kind of makes you feel even more comfortable when you're breaking it down.
Yeah, I think our zero RB experiment a couple weeks ago it kind of falls in line with what you're saying here. Like in current ADP and for the rest of this episode here anyways, we'll be using Fantasy Pros ADP. But in current ADP, DJ Moore is wide receiver 24. So I think like right there might be the argument for waiting on wide receiver and being able to capitalize on some of that early running back talent. Someone like DJ Moore, dude, you can put me on record saying this. I'm not listening, and I'm not saying it's gonna happen. But I think there's a fine to solid chance that someone like DJ Moore ends up having more receiving yards than Justin Jefferson at the end of the season, who's being drafted 8th overall. Like it's a huge gap, but when you compare these guys side by side, if this was the year DJ Moore just got drafted, then it would be a whole nother story. We'd probably be drafting these guys in the same round, but we just saw Justin Jefferson explode for 1,400 yards as a rookie. So right away, he's going to get that 8th overall pump. But where DJ Moore is at, and I think he represents kind of a nice line for like where I draw the line for my team's wide receiver 1. Like if I was really going to wait and I started my draft with a couple running backs and I got me a little, Travis Kelce or George Kittle up there, I might have a quarterback. I think I'm still comfortable with DJ Moore as my wide receiver 1. So I'm kind of curious where, and again, using Fantasy Pros ADP, where you might draw the line. Like this is the absolute furthest that I'm willing to go. And if I don't take this wide receiver right here, I'm toast. I might as well just pay my league fee and I'll see you.
So, and the other thing to put this into perspective, as of right now, and again, it's early. DJ Moore, at least what I'm looking at as well, and hopefully we're on the same page. And actually, I think I just figured out that I'm not, but it probably doesn't adjust it that much. It's around 60th overall. I mean, that's craziness, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy. Yeah, 61 overall and half PPR right now over at Fantasy Pros.
Yeah, you know what? I had it on PPR. That was my bad.
Oh, good. I was on standard scoring, so we weren't ever near each other really on this for this. Looking at it as as I scroll down here, there's guys above DJ Moore right now in ADP that I wouldn't really feel comfortable with, even as much as I am with DJ Moore. Like Tyler Lockett's one spot above. I will continue to bury Adam Thielen and pretty much till he retires. He's about a handful of spots above DJ Moore right now. Like if I'm just looking at this, guys that are going, 27th, 28th overall in ADP right now, T Higgins, Brandon Ayuk. I love those sophomore wide receivers. I'm not mad if those are my wide receiver 1s, like on my fantasy team. Now my wide receiver 2 is probably going to be pretty close to hit those types of guys. Right. But I've got to be loaded everywhere else and not with a quarterback, right? So, those are 2 guys that are just a few spots lower. So I'm not going too much further than you, to be honest. I mean, there's definitely guys that I like a little bit further down. But yeah, I'd maybe go a few more players, but after that, it's kind of, I'm kind of like, all right, I maybe ignore this a little bit too much. But again, that's round 5. That's insane. That's insane value for players that can put up 1,200 yards, like we've seen from DJ Moore over the course of his short career, and these 2 wide receivers, sophomore guys that I just mentioned, I think are studs. So I think you can really, really wait on the position, and that hopefully means you're walking away your first, 3-4 rounds with 3 running backs and a tight end, or 4, or whatever. So it's definitely a position I feel like you can wait on, and if that's only just one example of how deep this position is.
Yeah, well, what if we went even a little bit deeper? Like, my original idea for this show was to almost mirror the 0 RB episode and talk about, well, okay, what if we did 0 wide receiver?
Sure.
And I feel like you almost never hear people talk about that. Like, is 0 wide receiver even a thing, or are we just kind of making that up as we go? Like, I feel like, what do you call 0 wide receiver? Like, your wide receiver 1 is wide receiver 30 off the board?
Well, I mean, when we were looking at it, as far as the definition of 0 running back is waiting until round 5 or 6 for the position. DJ Moore 60th overall. I mean, that's, you're right around that range. So I think you can definitely do that. I think it's just less intentional because it's just much more in line with the rest of everyone's like with the majority of strategies, right? But I will say, I've definitely if I can get a shot on one of the elite tight ends, over, even if he's going head to head with a receiver, like, yes, in that moment, I might like Jefferson, or Ridley over, Travis Kelce, right? But the value that I'm going to get there for him, having Kelce in my tight end slot versus the receivers, I can just fill in those other wide, in place of those wide receiver names in mid draft. That's a trade off that I want. So I will say that for this year, and whether I'm overly intentional about it or not, as far as going to get that tight end, and I'm sure we'll talk about it this off season. But if it comes down to it, and I don't like the running backs that are there, I will lean towards picking up the tight end over the uber elite wide receiver, just because, again, I do feel so confident that this position is extremely deep. It doesn't make these guys bad players, but when you're factoring in, the position scarcity at running back, the cliff is much steeper at tight end. So that's why it's just like, man, I will rather, go after and target those other positions rather than, take the wide receiver there that early.
Again, kind of comparing and contrasting the 0 RB thing we did a couple weeks ago to the wide receiver episode today. What do you think is scarier, going wide receiver with your first 4 picks like we did in our 0 RB mock a couple weeks ago, or waiting until the, what did I say, 30th wide receiver off the board to start your wide receiver core?
I think it. I mean, and this is, again, goes back to my preference and how I want to handle my team in the format. Like, if it's PPR, if I start with 4 stud wide receivers and everybody else is going the other way,
it's hard to be mad at that.
With running backs, that sounds awesome, right? Like, I will figure it out, and you can still find guys to play. I want to go at least one running back that I feel like semi-confident in, right? So if I'm, I'd even go as far as like, and this is a guy that I'm down on, so we'll see where he ends up on ADP. Like, if I go 4 wide receivers and I get Josh Jacobs in PPR, right? Because he could fall that far. He doesn't catch a lot of passes. I'd be totally fine with that, right? I feel like, man, I am absolutely freaking loaded. I have at least one running back, and I will Tariq Cohen it up later on with those types of guys, and I'll be fine because my receivers are just freaking studly. So in PPR, I would be scared if I went 0 wide receiver, I think. But in half, man, I would if I went straight wide receivers in that format, I would probably be scared of that.
That's an important caveat too. Like, if it's PPR format, it's tough to wait until wide receiver 30 to finally dip your toe in the water.
Mm-hmm.
In PPR, I'd have a tough time waiting outside that DJ Moore range for my first receiver.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's probably something I'll do even more homework on this year. Again, I've done it in the past, too, just trying to see where that cliff is at, right? What are my options? And, if I have to address this position later, how much am I giving up here? Is it 1.5 points a game? Is it 2 points per game? When you looked at, you look at Travis Kelce to the tight end 12, it was just some ungodly number, right? And it's just like that, I don't want that. I don't want to be, if I have the opportunity, I will go ahead, I'll just take Kelsey if it makes sense, and I don't have to worry about trying to play that roulette wheel to just get tight end 12. That just sounds horrible. So I think I'll definitely do some more homework on that and bring it as far as like from a format perspective. But yeah, it definitely plays a factor for me. I'm looking at that wide receiver rankings a lot earlier in PPR leagues.
Yeah. So if you're interested in trying out, and I don't even know if I want to call it zero wide receiver, if you just want to wait later in the draft for wide receivers, right now, according to Fantasy Pros, the top 24 wide receivers are gone in the first 5 rounds. So I want to go through some of the players that are going to be available after that. I'll call this the mid-late round wide receivers, the guys who you can find, readily available in like the 6th to 7th rounds, depending on format. They're your wide receiver 3s. But I'm curious what you think of some of these names, and if you think some of these guys might be able to pop off for wide receiver 2, or dare I say wide receiver 1 type value. But these are the guys who are being taken in ADP somewhere between wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 35. We got guys like and you know what? The names I've written down here, I'm realizing now are probably from that PPR list I was looking at. So bear with me here. Odell Beckham, Cortland Sutton, both of the Steelers, Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool, DJ Chark, Will Fuller, T. Higgins. Kyle, anyone from that list standing out to you? Anyone that you really like that maybe stands out to you over another?
I mean, I really like T. Higgins still. If people are down on him because there's more Chase Lanning there,
and they are.
That's a mistake. Like I think Higgins is going to make a jump. As much as I love Tyler Boyd, it's probably going to come at his expense as well. They're going to throw the ball though, just a crazy amount of times. Like I'm pretty sure if there was a measurement of ass ton, that's how many times the Bengals are going to throw the ball this year. It's going to be ridiculous.
How many ass tons?
Exactly? How many ass tons?
Yeah,
1 billion ass tons. No, Higgins is the guy that jumps out to me for sure. But every name that you listed there, besides Odell Beckham Jr. for me, is those guys are wide receiver 2s, like for my teams. Like I feel really confident in those guys as wide receiver 2s.
What's your deal with Odell Beckham Jr.? I feel like this guy, he's got to be a lock for 1,000 yards, right? Like the main concern for me with Odell Beckham is like, I don't know if the touchdowns are going to be there. Like he doesn't seem like that. I don't know, that uber. I mean, he's still an alpha receiver. He's still Odell Beckham Jr. I just don't think the touchdowns are going to be available in this offense. I don't know off the top of my head. I think he had like 6 or 4 or in some order when he's been with the Browns, but I want to see that number jump up and then pair that with 1,000 receiving yards. And then I'm happy, but I still feel like 1,000's doable, right?
Yeah, I mean, 1,000 yards is doable. I don't think that especially now. I mean, I guess whatever that calibrates to over an extra game.
That doesn't make him a super desirable wide receiver. But I mean, you're in on Jarvis Landry, right? So it's not the offense in particular. It's Odell Beckham that you've got beef with.
I think they're both wide receiver 3s. And if Odell Beckham's name was Jehoshaphat Jones, we wouldn't even be talking about him where he's at right now. We think that he has this upside that he hasn't had since he got to Cleveland because they just don't throw the ball enough. And they're not efficient enough on offense that they're going to get him what he needs to do to be a wide receiver 2, in my opinion. Like he might get there. He could finish, to 24, but no, man, I don't think he has top 20 upside.
That's his new nickname forever on this show. I'm going to be like, so, week 7, wrapping it up. Jehoshaphat had about 50 yards and a touchdown. Nice day from Mr. Jones.
Yeah, dude, he's just a guy that I get. I think if you just blind resume him compared to other receivers that are in this range, man, and he's been around enough. Like when you talk about Claypool and Higgins and Ayuk and and even Chark, like I just feel like, man, they have some unknowns to their game still. They're in situations where I think we feel like it could pop a bit in Cleveland and with Odell Beckham over the course of his career outside that first season and a half. Like it's kind of just been meh, but he has the name and he'll go earlier than I will take him. So maybe that's just it. Maybe I just know I'm never going to actually roster Odell Beckham Jr. ever.
What about Cortland Sutton? He's another one of those names that I brought up in that list. And last time we saw Cortland Sutton, it was 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns in his sophomore season in the league. Mm-hmm. It seems like he's a bargain at where he's at right now. Wide receiver 3 value. What do you think is suppressing his value more? The question marks surrounding the quarterback position in Denver, or the addition of Jerry Jeudy as it pertains to like target competition in Denver?
Yeah, I think the quarterback thing is what's bringing him down the most. I mean, and this isn't the only situation. Even the Cleveland situation is another one of these. Like, I will take whoever is cheapest, from that team, right? If Judy's going a round and a half later, then I'm definitely taking Jerry Jeudy. If that flips, I'm on Team Sutton now. Same thing with Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. I think they're even enough that I'm not going to spend a premium price on the other guy. So it stinks because, again, I feel like I talk about Denver all the freaking time. Like, I wish they would have gone out and got Fields, right? That would have been, we wouldn't be talking about these guys in this range, Yeah. And I just think with Locke or Bridgewater, I think that it's capped that one of these guys can be a low end 2, a high end 3, right? And then that's it. I don't know if they can sustain both of them at the level that we would want for, consistently feeling confident enough to plug them in our lineup. But that's also what you're looking at, with this strategy. If you're waiting and you're taking one of these guys as a starter on your team, you're going to collect a few. And then you have to just know, like, I'm playing matchups, and you have to, again, what do you feel comfortable doing when you leave your draft? I feel comfortable as hell identifying wide receivers that are, that could break out. But also, too, I know that I have an edge over a lot of people in my league because I'm going to put the time in to know that I'm going to get the right matchup call, right? When you have a lot of options, if you hate making that tough call and every week, like, damn it, I keep choosing the wrong guy. All right, well, then switch it up. Don't give yourself so many options. That's one way to do it. So, that's the tough part with these guys. It's just, what do you feel confident in? I think Sutton, I'd love for him to actually have a quarterback, but that's the thing that's pulling him back for me.
Well, there is a rumor that Deshaun Watson.
There is.
Yes, it could happen. If you'd listen to Aqib Talib's podcast, Kyle, you would know these things.
I haven't dabbled in the Aqib Talib podcast yet. I was scrolling through, Apple Podcasts, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's the War Zone. No Aqib Talib podcast. Forget it.
Hey, make sure you check out the Dynasty War Zone. Give us 5 stars. After you're done with that, go ahead and check out Aqib Talib's podcast. Leave him 5 stars. And
4 stars.
Yeah, leave them 4 stars and a review that says the Fantasy Football Smackdown sent you here.
Exactly. Let them know. Gotcha. Take that, Aqib. We're starting a podcast for you with Aqib Talib podcast. We don't even know the name of it. It's on.
I also mentioned that 2 of the 3 Pittsburgh Steelers are available in this wide receiver 3 range: Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool. Last season, it was kind of just disappointment all around. I mean, not to the worst that it could be, but all in all, another disappointing season for Juju Smith-Schuster. Chase Claypool, on the other hand, passing expectations, putting together all kinds of touchdowns. Big rookie year for this guy. And then, I didn't even bring up Deontay Johnson. He's getting picked in the top 5 rounds right now. Mm-hmm. And my first take, I guess, on the Steelers offense as a whole, like, I feel like defenses are going to really struggle to stop this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. You hear all this talk and debate about the offensive line and what they're going to contribute or lack thereof in the offense. But I think the addition of a guy like Najee Harris, that's the kind of guy that I think can elevate an entire offense. He's going to be a stud on the ground. And I brought this up probably a couple months ago. I don't know. But I said that you'd be seeing these videos online now of Najee Harris lined up in the slot, receiving catches, and he's doing that. He's catching them behind the back. He's putting on a show for his audience. And I'm buying in. I think the whole thing's going to happen, and I think it's going to make the entire offense better. I think it's going to have to make defenses stay honest. If covering Deontay Johnson wasn't enough, then you've got Chase Claypool. If that wasn't enough, you got Juju. Oh, and now you've got Najee Harris coming out of the backfield, who's also going to be a big-time threat to catch passes. You've got to respect what he can do on the ground. All that being said, I'm stuck, man. I think this is going to be a debate until September 1st. And I'm pretty sure I've asked you this 10 times maybe since we've started podcasting together. But how do you have these 3 ranked right now between Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Chase Claypool? And is it pretty much just like throw them in a hat or pick, or do you have some sort of like reasonable process behind your thinking?
Well, and the thing that makes it the most entertaining discussion point, I think, too, is like there are a ton of great duos in this league. And there are teams that have a solid wide receiver 3. You know, like I'm going to end up with, you know, Tyler Boyd will be the 3 in ADP once we get there. But like I'll end up with some Tyler Boyd, Michael Gallup. I think, you know, your boy Antonio Brown's making a case, you know, to be considered as one of those, one of the first wide receiver 3s on his team drafted for fantasy. That is a very long category, but he's in the running.
If you think we're not going to talk about Antonio Brown, you're mistaken.
But for the Pittsburgh guys, it's all like, man, they're all kind of bunched together. We saw success from all of them last year, even though Juju was disappointing from expectations. He had a fine year.
Yeah.
Kind of helped by the touchdown, but that's fine. For me, it's one of those things. It's like, what's your appetite? You know, do you want extreme upside? I think you're going Chase Claypool. Now, I'm not taking him over. Now, he's right ahead of T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk. I don't really think I have those guys a tier ahead. So, but I think the most upside goes with Chase Claypool. Do you want something kind of, you know, steady? Do you a fan of targets? Deontay Johnson's your man, right? Do you want kind of that, you know, you want to Goldilocks this thing? Juju Smith-Schuster, right? He's just right?
That's
He's
a good way to look at it. It's almost like when you're putting together like an investment portfolio or a retirement plan, and they're asking you your like your risk ratio or whatever they call it. It's been a while, but you know, are you a high risk person? You know, you want a little Chase Claypool. You want to get that big reward at the end of the day, or you want to play it safe and, you know, stick with the targets you're gonna get from Deontay Johnson. I think that's a good way to look at and debate the 3 receivers in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and Juju for me, I think he's just right in the middle there, and it helps. Like the reason I keep getting Juju in mock drafts and on teams is because he's coming in last, you know, according to ADP right now. And you know, and I mean, and don't even get for Dynasty, he's the only one who can escape Pittsburgh after Ben leaves. So like that's why I love him for Dynasty. But for redraft, he's the cheapest, so I will take him. You know, and if he gives me 1,007 again or whatever, well, he was just under 1,000 last year. Yeah, man, that's great. He's going to return that for you. I love he's going right now just behind. He's just behind Chase Claypool, but 74th, 75th overall. That's a guy I feel real comfortable with as my wide receiver too. You know, especially so. This is why I'm going to wait to these mid rounds and grab guys like that.
Yeah, there's already some sweet names you can get in round 6, round 7. Now let's talk about guys, your late round wide receivers, guys who are available outside of the 8th round. I'm talking outside of the top 40 wide receivers on Fantasy Pros ADP. We'll get started with all the Colts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell, every single one of them is going to be available. So you can go ahead and get the Colts wide receiver 1 at no cost. Curtis Samuel, Antonio Brown, Mr. Big Chest himself, Jalen Waddle, Mike Williams, Rashad Bateman, Rondale Moore, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You start to get into those rookies. But tell me what names stuck out to you that I just mentioned there, or better yet, why don't we just start with that entire Colt picture? And I'll ask you the same thing that I asked you pertaining to the Steelers. You know, rank those 3 for me for redraft 2021.
Yeah, I think it's like you know, when you're going to the store and you want some Oreos, that's a Steeler situation, right? Yeah. If you want you know, chocolate sandwich cookie, that's this situation. This is the great value, right? This is the generic version of the Oreo cookie.
Yeah, you want to go get some Cracklin' Oats cereal that you're going to the Indianapolis Colts store.
Yes.
That's one for you old school listeners.
Yeah. So for me, I like Pittman the best of the 3. I think you know, he's somebody, again, if he was drafted just a couple picks earlier, he would have been a first rounder, right? And like that's it. But the difference that people have in their mindset that, oh, this guy's a first rounder versus second or third, or, you know, day 2 guys. Pittman was an early second round pick. They invested in him. When he was out there, you know, he showed some promise, but he just was banged up all year. And, you know, they were especially trying to lean on JT in that second half. So I like Pittman the best of the 3. Even if he is the most expensive, when you get down this far, he's 46th overall or 46th amongst wide receivers, 121st overall right now. He's a guy that I think now with Carson Wentz, a little bit different type of quarterback in this offense and going ahead into year 2. You know, he's definitely not in my top 5, you know, sophomore wide receivers, but dang, you know, I really do like the upside. So I'll end up with him, you know, a bunch. So I would rate him Pittman, Hilton, and Campbell. I just think I don't have a ton of faith in Paris Campbell yet. The dude is just banged up all the time. So he's going last of the three, I'm pretty sure. I don't even know where he is on this list. So
no. I'm very sure you're right. Now listen, here's the thing. This is where you're contradicting, because typically you want the best, the cheapest of a trio here. That guy is Paris Campbell. That guy's looking at you in the face. And tell me, I mean, Paris Campbell, he might just be the best wide receiver right now in this offense. We have T.Y. Hilton clearly out of his prime. Mm-hmm. We had 1 year of Michael Pittman in which there was no Paris Campbell to be had. I have a couple notes here, just some stuff I picked up on Player Profiler. 18-year-old breakout age. That is 100th percentile. 97th percentile burst score, 97th percentile speed score. The dude ran a 4.31 at 6 foot, 205 pounds. Kyle, is there any reason why this guy cannot be the wide receiver one in this offense? I think he's super underrated. I think he's super flying under the radar. I think there's not a lot of target competition in Indianapolis. I like Michael Pittman, but I don't think he's an enormous threat. I like T.Y. Hilton, but he's over the hill. So, Paris Campbell seems to have all of the athletic prerequisites. Do you think he can put it all together if he stays healthy? Big asterisk next to it. If he stays healthy, do you think that, is this possible? Wide receiver one in his offense?
I think it's possible because, the other guys are not solidified. I think there's some question marks with all of them. The reason that I like, even though Pittman's the most expensive, I like him the most is because we're talking outside the top 100. Like we're at this point, and Campbell, I had to search his name there and it probably caused my internet to
probably like
out.
300 or something.
It was like 290 or something like that. So like, so if I had to rank him, like including that, I would go Pittman still first, but then I would probably put Campbell over just because I know like I could just take with my last pick over T.Y. Hilton. I figured they were a little bit closer than that, but once you get in the later rounds, that price isn't that big of a deal. If I'm taking a guy in round 10 versus round 13, at that point, everybody's kind of going for their favorite dart throws. For me, that's a difference between, I had to take this guy in round 4 versus round, even round 5. Like that's a bigger gap for me as far as, what I had to give up elsewhere. So I still prefer Pittman. I think he's just a more complete player, but Campbell, he's definitely showed, flashes during his time in the NFL, and it is wide open. It's definitely not like, he's trying to get second fiddle. Like it's wide open there in Indy. They didn't address the position like people thought they might. They're, as much as I do like that offense, and I like these names are interesting. Like there's not one guy that jumps out anywhere in that offense right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that situation shakes.
Yeah, Campbell, second round pick. He's got the pedigree. It just seems like, again, it's just that injury bug that kind of seems to be suppressing his value. People aren't sure exactly what he is. I feel like it's kind of the same thing with another dude I mentioned, Mike Williams. I struggle, man, to fade players because they might get hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like
sure.
the dreaded injury prone label. But Mike Williams, 7th overall pick in 2017. It's that pedigree that just, it keeps me coming back. You know who else was the 7th overall pick in their draft, Kyle? Randy Moss. You know who else was the 7th round pick in their draft, though?
Who's that?
Jerry Rice.
Jerry. Well, then, there's no arguing with all that.
You know who else was the 7th round pick in their draft?
Who?
Terrell Owens.
Oh, jeez.
You know who else? Who else was the 7th overall pick in their draft?
I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
Tim Brown.
So this makes Mike Williams.
Those guys. You know who else was the 7th overall pick in their draft? Andre Johnson.
I think at this point your dad is off.
I was wondering how long I could go before you finally called bullshit on
I'm like, what the hell are we talking about here?
Like, there's no way all these guys were 7th overall. What are the odds?
What the hell?
No, I just Googled like the all-time receiving list, and I was like, this would be fun.
Yeah, I'm like, that doesn't sound right at all. But I'm like, he's the one saying it, not me. So
yep. Jake did the research.
Go ahead. Yeah, I don't know this guy. No, actually, Mike. I was gonna say this on Williams. Like, if we, and this is one of those things, and you can definitely just get caught up in narrative a bit, but like, we all love Justin Herbert, right? And I love Keenan Allen, and he's gonna ball. But like, they lost Hunter Henry. Yep. They didn't really bring in anybody else of significance that we're expecting to contribute right away. Mike Williams is playing for a contract. I will bet on that a lot. You see these guys all the time coming out and showing up in contract years. So, it's just there's not a lot of weapons in that offense. And, as much, and I love Eckler, but there's plenty of targets to go around. And Williams is a downfield threat, big play guy. His yards per reception, he's towards the top of the league every year, so he doesn't need, 150, he doesn't need 120 targets. He could do it. Give me 100 and he's going to outperform the value that you're going to able to get him for right now. So
we already saw this guy put up 1,000 yards in 2019. We saw this guy put up 10 touchdowns in 2018.
Didn't he have that year he scored 10 touchdowns? Didn't he have like 43 catches?
Oh, I don't know. It was like 600 and something yards.
It was so ridiculous. He had no catches.
Sense. But if he could just put that 10 touchdowns together with that, what's stopping him from putting it all together?
It's simple.
In 2021 for a Devontae Parker style breakout. I think that's now the Devontae Parker patented breakout. You got to wait. Is this his fifth year?
This is year 5. This is year 5. I'm
for Mike Williams?
Sure. Yeah.
I guess so. 2017. Yeah.
They picked up his 5th year option. Yeah. So
what is stopping him from putting it all together this season with the best quarterback he's ever had, one of the top young ascending quarterbacks in this league? I think Mike Williams is going to end up being a tremendous value in drafts. That's a guy that I want to take a stab on. I mean, we're talking about doing this quote unquote 0 wide receiver thing. Yeah. And again, it's scary, like the 0 RB thing, but I mean, you take your wide receiver 1 as DJ Moore, you take your wide receiver 2 as Mike Williams. It's not sexy and it's not recommended. I'm not telling you to do that right here on the Fantasy Football Smackdown. But I mean, if the rest of your team is Travis Kelce and you've got, Christian McCaffrey was your first pick, you circled back around and got, your team could be jacked and you can end up coming out there with a hero in Mike Williams and a hero in DJ Moore. It's a lot of wishful thinking if I'm being truthfully honest with you. I'd much rather I'd shoot for Mike Williams as my wide receiver. I don't know, 4 I'd be comfortable with.
Yeah,
wide
and
receiver 3 seems a little scary, but I'd go for it. I think if I was in a pinch.
He's going so late in drafts, like. At that point too, sometimes it's just, we don't need to overthink it. Just keep it simple. The dude is going to be involved in a high powered, high volume passing offense. Done with an elite quarterback, right? Give me that. Sometimes it's just that easy. Just find those guys. You want volume. And he's not a target hog, but he's going to be an offense that is going to throw the ball a lot, and with a quality quarterback, so those targets are going to obviously be quality as well. He's not going to Drew Lock him to death. So he's a guy that jumps out to me as well. He just doesn't, it seems like he doesn't fit in that group. I'm just like, I don't know. I think I just like him better than all those guys easily. So that one's been interesting to me so far this season.
Before we sign out of here, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Detroit wide receiver situation. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to be a value. He's buried so deep right now in ADP that even by draft season, I feel like he's going to be just barely being drafted. But they actually have a little more depth in Detroit than I originally thought. So they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got Brashad Perriman, who's he's shown flashes, right? He was a highly touted prospect back in 1970 something. They've got Tyrell Williams. They've got Quintez Cephas. Something came out about him today, looking awfully nice with the Lions. So I'm curious how exactly you, just for the fun of it, to wrap up this episode, Kyle, rank the Detroit Lions wide receivers. I will, and I'll read them off again in case you forgot them, because I don't blame you. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams, Quintez Cephas, and you let me know because I might even be forgetting somebody.
First,
Hawkinson doesn't count.
Oh, damn you! That was my joke.
All right, Swift,
no, but these are the guys that if they're all going to go, 12 plus. I'm feeling like, right. And if somebody wants to reach any lower than that, then that's on them. But this is an offense. Like sometimes you just got to look at I wish the alternative wasn't Tyrod, whatever he wants to be called, Taylor in Houston. Like that's a team that's going to be chucking the ball a lot too. But as weird as it sounds, like I'd rather have Jared Goff throwing the ball 650 times than, they're not going to throw it that much with Tyrod under center. So sometimes there's these types of situations where like the defense is crap. There's no other premier guys. So someone's going to fall into 100 targets here. For me, it's Tyrell Williams. Do I love him more than anyone else? Am I that passionate about it? Not really. But when they're all going to go borderline undrafted, I will take Tyrell. He's shown it. He stepped up for Keenan Allen just a few years back. They might have been in San Diego then still. So, it's been a while, but I think the guy has shown enough flashes to do. But am I overly confident in any of them? No. But the situation spells enough where you can take a shot. It's not, like I said, it's not Houston where you're trying to find who's the wide receiver 2 for the Texans. It doesn't matter. He's wide receiver 87 when it comes to fantasy, so you don't need to worry about him. So.
Hey, don't you talk about Nico Collins like that right now, Kyle.
Jesus. Dudes, one of my favorite thing to do is look at rookie ADP and stuff, and then go. You don't even need to do your own. Go look then at any rankings. Go look at dynasty rankings, and it's like, oh man, this guy's an early 3rd round sleeper, right? In rookie drafts. Yeah, he's even with all that hype right now, he's ranked like 91st among receivers. Just like, it's hilarious where these guys really end up. But I do have some numbers that I think we can wrap the show up. I don't know how much response you would have to these because it's kind of just their numbers, but I did look this up, 3-year average, right? So bear with me because this is we got some numbers here. 3-year average, wide receivers that had scored more than 14 points and half PPR, they were over the last 3 seasons, they've averaged 11 wide receivers to score 14 or more. In comparison, running backs have 12. Wide receivers to score between 12 and 14 points, 11, compared to running backs at 9. So running backs kind of have an edge there. But from 9 to 12 points per game, wide receivers average 24 wide receivers score between 9 and 12 fantasy points per game, compared to running backs is at 13. So overall, on average, players to score at least 9 points per game, there are 47 wide receivers on average over the last 3 years, compared to running backs at 35. You're talking about 11 extra players that are getting you in that range compared to the running back position. This tells you just how deep the position is, where that running back fall off is, and why I think it's way smarter to just continue to take flyers on the wide receiver position, because you're going to be able to find these guys. Again, an average of 47 wide receivers over the last 3 years have scored at least 9 fantasy points per game in half PPR, compared to 35 at running back. I mean, when I saw that, I'm like, that's exactly why I feel way more comfortable taking stabs at wide receivers. So, and we've talked about a lot of names here today too.
Yeah, I know from firsthand experience, it's real easy to get caught up when you're at the end of the draft and that first big bundle of running backs is off the board, and you're like, oh, I'm staring at the top 3 wide receivers right now, or I could have the RB6 or RB7.
Yeah.
But when you put it into perspective like that, and just the value of wide receivers that you can find that we displayed here today in the 6th, the 7th, 8th round and beyond, all the way to your Amon-Ra St. Browns with your last pick, it definitely makes sense. I mean, we talked about it before. I think all in all, what I've taken from the 0 RB thing / 0 wide receiver thing, and you sort of alluded to it when you talked about your strategies. It's kind of like, I kind of like that anchor running back thing. I like to get me that solid running back and then load up on those PPR monsters. Get me those guys that are going to just score me points on account of volume alone. And then the production otherwise is just a bonus.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'll tell you what. This was super fun talking about some wide receivers. We've covered wide receivers. We've covered running backs. I don't know if we've talked about too much. You want to do? Are we doing quarterbacks? Are we doing tight ends? What do we got in store?
I mean, we definitely are going to cover these positions, talking some strategy. We might have something special in store for next week too. People just have to tune back in, mainly because I don't know yet. And as we part this off too, man, I think the only guy that might get more pub than Aqib Talib podcast on this show over the course of this year is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. That guy is going to be on every damn show. When we talk tight ends, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to make an appearance.
Yeah, it's going to be tight ends, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Aqib Talib.
There we go. All right, man. Well, this has been a ton of fun, Jake. Thanks for hosting. This is a great discussion. Again, keep doing those mock drafts. Get a feel for what these draft rooms are going to look like come August. You can follow Jake on Twitter at JakeTakesFF. You can follow me on Twitter at KyleMonth8. Subscribe, rate, and review the show. Again, don't forget those 4-star reviews for Aqib Talib's podcast. And rate, and when you rate, put the FF Smackdown in there and watch us on YouTube, because now you can see Jake's awesome shirt. We'll catch you guys next week. Until then, see you later.